Hey everybody, Carl here, and I thought we would continue on checking out the Zenith and looking at the circuits a little bit more. Now, I thought we would look at probably one of the most fascinating parts of the radio circuit, especially the tube radios, and we're going to be looking, first of all, the tube we're going to be looking at is the 12BE6. And now, if you want to look it up in your RCA tube manual, it's the same thing as a 6BE6, except that the filament voltage is just a little bit different. That's all. But they basically work the same, and so I thought we'd take a look at that particular circuit, that very special area that makes the whole thing possible. Now, before we get going, I want to do a little bit of a plug, okay? Most of you guys know Rick McWhorter. If you're in electronics, and especially if you're in the radios, and you probably already know who he is, and you've been there many times. He's been a mentor to many of us. Matter of fact, probably Rick and John in Arkansas, probably those two have been like one of the most heavily influences for me as far as actually really learning and understanding tube radios. When I was young, I might have talked about this before, but as a kid, when I was getting interested in electronics, everything, everything was tubes. The radios were tubes, and the TVs were tubes, and the record players were tubes, right? But they started coming out with this thing called a transistor, and I know that my parents got me a Zenith, a 500 actually, and I loved that thing, and I thought it was so cool because it was so small. We were used to these big radios that were, the small ones were big size on the counter, and then you had your large consoles and all that. But I thought this new technology is really cool. So I kind of followed, trying to learn and understand the printed circuits and transistors, and I kind of went that route. So even though tubes were all around me, I really didn't dig in and get to understand what was going on with them. Like I said, and Rick was a very big influence on me really learning and really understanding how they work. One of the cool things is I wanted to show you, he wrote this book, and I'll tell you what, if you want to know how a radio works, this is the book you're going to want to get. I know I got mine quite a few years ago. I think I got it on Amazon. Now, and it's, if you really want to learn this stuff, this would be a great book to pick up. He also has another book online that's free, and it covers a shortwave radio, which is pretty much the same, but this goes into great detail on how everything works. So I thought I'd throw that out there. It's the All-American 5 radio, and it says it all, okay? So I just, wanted to give this a plug, because what we're going into, a lot of this stuff I learned from actually reading this book here. Okay, so we're going to look at this this mystery tube and this circuit, the tuner converter oscillator. And what happens is the radio waves come in through the antenna, they go through this circuit, and next thing you know, they're going through the IF, the intermediate frequency circuit, being amplified, and then finally the radio frequency is, or the intermediate frequency is stripped off and we have the audio. But it all starts coming off the antenna, going into this particular tube in this particular circuit. Okay, so how does this work? Well, I put a couple things up on the whiteboard, and I thought we'd kind of look at them, and I'm going to try my best to try to explain what's going on. Like I said, you know, that book that Rick wrote, it dials it right in. So if you really want to fine tune, that's where to go. But for right now, we're gonna cover it as best we can, and maybe you'll have a basic understanding of what's happening. And by doing that, then you can go on. You can do more research and you know, take it as far as you want. So okay, let's take a look up here at the whiteboard, and we'll get started. Okay, so here's a rough drawing of the 12BE6, all right? And we have, on this part here, we have L1, which is our antenna. We have that coming in, and it's feeding into this one grid, which is the signal grid, because the signal's coming in, right? Now, when we look further down, we have another line coming in down here at this grid, and that's our oscillator grid, okay? So we have two different, and this is an input, and this is an input. And then these are your grids that you would normally have in a lot of your tubes. That they're like screen grids. They help control the electrons. Up here, we have the plate. And as they drop down, we're going to look at that in just a second. But that's the basic tube, okay? And it's a very busy tube, and we'll go over it a little bit in the RCA manual. Matter of fact, why don't we do that now? All right, now I'm looking at the manual here, and what I'm doing is I'm going to the 6BE6, because that's where everything, all the information is. Like I said, the 12 is the same thing, except it's just the voltage is different. So what it says here, it's a miniature type used as a converter in AM and FM receivers. And if you want to go to the outline section, that's in 5C. It requires miniature 7-contact socket. It's similar in performance to the 6SA7. For a general discussion of pentagrid types, you can go to another section here in the frequency conversion, which is what we're going to talk about. And then, like it says, the type 12BE6 is identical with the type 6BE6, except for the heater radiance, and that's what we discussed. We know that. So, and like I said, if you have the book, you can look it up, or if you can go online and get your copy of a RCA tube manual in PDF form. So, with that said, I just thought I'd throw that in, just show you there's a lot of info in there. So we see how the tube is laid out. So now let's jump up here and let's look at the circuit that this thing's connected to. Now this right here, this line is from 2, okay? This right here drops down, and it's part of the cathode. I didn't put the resistor in here because we had it down below. But if you notice up here, we have a set of capacitors, and down here we have a set of capacitors, and the dotted lines mean that they are ganged together. So when this one is turned this one also turns. And that's important because as we change the frequency is going to determine where things are going. You know, such as, like, let's say if we want to listen to 980, you know, on our radio dial, we change it, and by changing this here, it's going to change the whole frequency in what's coming out of there. When we look here, it says L2. This is the oscillating coil, and it's this coil here that when the power comes down and the tube is ramping up, it's getting energized, this creates a field in here, right? And we know that when you have a field, it's transferred over. Now it gets to a certain point, and the tube reaches its maximum. It can't do anything anymore, so it starts to fall. And when it falls, this also starts to fall, and that creates that. What happens is it collapses and creates a burst. And when that burst happens, that creates a power, and we have oscillating over here, what we talked about, remember in the last video, where you have it's going back and forth, and as this powers on, powers off, powers on, powers off, that's what gives the energy for it to keep going back and forth. Now at the same time, because this right here, especially this capacitor, with this capacitor, which is actually a trimmer, but that dictates at what frequency it's going to oscillate. So this helps actually control, is it going to go a little bit faster, a little bit slower? That's where this comes in, and that's falling and building up, falling and building up, and that's making this go up and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that gives us our oscillation, that gives us our frequency. So this then is sent back up to our tube, which let me go down here again now. Okay, so now this oscillating frequency comes into here, and that gives us one of the frequencies that's going to be on the plate. Now at the same time, because now let me go back up here, as the antenna is picking up and it's coming through here, this is letting certain frequencies of the radio frequency come in, and that's controlled by this capacitor right here. And just like down below, this is also a trimmer. So when you put the antenna, which is our coil up here, along with this, we get the frequency that we're going to bring in. Alright, so now let's drop back down to here, and that comes in from L1, what we're talking about, comes right here, and that is our signal grid, and that also is put on the plate. So now we have two different frequencies on the plate. We have one from the signal and we have one from the oscillator. But wait, there's more. Because of that, there's also a third and a fourth frequency. One of them is these two together, the signal and the oscillator put together, that's a third one. And then when you take away the signal from the oscillator, that's a fourth. And that's the one that we normally use for our IF. It's the one where the difference between the oscillator and the signal is used. And these are set in balance So no matter what you turn it to, when you take the oscillator away from the signal, or the signal away from the oscillator, in this case you'll get 455. Now, along with these, when this one coming in, it still has the modulation on it. It still has the audio on it. So that audio, no matter which one's going to come through, that audio is going to modulate that signal. So now we're going to have 455 coming out of here, or close to it, going into our first transformer, which is going to fine tune it, and it's going to be modulated with the audio, and it's going to start to put our 455 through the radio. Now I hope you guys, I probably lost half of you like way back there. You're like, what the hell is he talking? But this is basically how the radio gets its signal and starts sending it through. It's this tube right here, along with the oscillator and along with the signal coming in. Those are put into the tube. This oscillator, and like I said, you know, it's kind of cool the way that works. It's powering up and then it's releasing. It's powering up, releasing, and that's all it's doing. But this here controls it, and it actually gives us the frequency. This here controls the frequency that's let in from the antenna, from the signal, and we put them together. It goes in through our tube. We have the 4, but it uses the one that is the lowest, the one that where the signal is subtracted from the oscillator, and that's what we use. So, like I said, there's all 4 of these are going on, but that first transformer is set up to only take in the IF frequency that we want, which is that one, and it'd be 455 in this case. So, signals come in, this mixes them up, converts it to a signal coming out, or several signals coming out. The transformer grabs the one that we want and starts sending it through. And that's, you know, I mean, it's way more complicated than that, but that's the basics. And if you understand that that's what's happening at that first tube, then you got it. So I'm hoping that it kind of made sense. Like I said, half the time I do this, I'm so worried that, you know, it's like, you're not even sounding right, Carl. But hopefully that gave you some kind of understanding. And like I said before, if you get Rick's book, that will really help a lot too. And there's a lot of stuff online that you can look this up, and they give you explanations. Some of them get kind of they get a lot deeper than what I did. I can tell you that right now. So okay, hold on. Let's wrap this up. Okay, so we're going to shoot from a different angle. Why would we do that? Well, because the battery died on me at the end, which is it's not an unusual thing anymore. But anyway, I hope you got something out of this. And if enough people say I didn't understand one word you said, maybe I'll try to reshoot it. I don't know. But I'm just trying to give a basic idea of what's going on. And so I'm gonna let you go for now, and we'll be coming back soon, and we'll keep going right down the circuit, and we'll look at more of it as we go. And once we get an understanding what's happening, Then we'll go back and we'll start to look at the components in it. So until then, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you like what we're doing here, and if you want to keep watching, it'd be really great for you to join us. It's good for the channel. So until next time, everybody, take care. And like we always say, be good to one another, because even in these crazy times, we got to share this planet. So take care, everybody. Bye now.